Good evening, and welcome to the December 19th, 2018 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I request that everyone please turn off or mute all cell phones. I see we have a quorum. Do I have a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
At this time, please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For benefit of those in the audience and viewing tonight's meeting, no amendments to the St. Charles County zoning map will be considered at tonight's meeting. First, the applicant for rezoning and preliminary plat of the Auden Prairie subdivision on Wilson Road has asked the Planning and Zoning Commission to table these applications until the January 2019 commission meeting. Second, to clear up any possible confusion or misunderstanding, there is no application or review being considered tonight for the Missouri Bluffs development. The County Council rezoned the Missouri Bluffs property from agricultural to single-family residential zoning district in June of this year, 2018. At tonight's meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission will have an opportunity to review and comment on a countywide master plan prepared by the Master Plan Steering Committee. The proposed plan would be an updated policy guide for future decisions which impact development countywide. The master plan does not dictate decisions or outcomes, but instead offers an integrated set of recommendations. The master plan is one point of reference for decisions about land uses and future zoning amendments. In addition, conditional use permit requests will be heard tonight, and once the commission makes a recommendation, the applications will be scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, January the 7th, 2019 County Council meeting. Okay. And this is, the council has moved its regularly scheduled meeting into this January the 7th date. Public comment will be taken tonight and at the council meeting on Monday, January 7th, 2019. Public comment on conditional use permit applications will not be taken at any meeting of the County Council held thereafter. The following documents are introduced as a matter of record for this evening's public hearing and regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Unified Development Ordinance of St. Charles County, including zoning maps, and the year 2025 Master Plan for St. Charles County, which includes the year 2025 Future Land Use Plan map. Okay. The first thing on our agenda is RZ 18-12 and PRE 18-19, owner Wilson T&B LLC, developer J.S. Clement Construction LLC, current zoning A agricultural district, 5-acre minimum lot size, requested zoning RR, single-family residential district, 3-acre minimum lot size, number of lots 16, parcel size 51.18 acres, on the west side of Wilson Road, approximately 800 feet northwest of Lakeway Drive near Bromwell Park. This is in Council District 2. Applicant has requested that this be continued to our January meeting. Chair would entertain a motion as such.
So make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
So if anyone's here for the rezoning and preliminary plat for Auden Prairie, that was now been continued to our January meeting. Next up is conditional use permit request. Location is 4431 Highway P. This is CUP 18-17, owner James Smarco, applicant is Loyal Order of Squirrels. Property zoning is A agricultural district. Requested use is a private club. Parcel size is 10 acres. The location is on the north side of Highway P, approximately 500 feet southwest of Flint Hill Drive, near Flint Hill in Council District 1. How we will proceed, We will ask the staff for their report concerning this application. Then we'll have the applicant come forward to present their application and allow the commission to ask questions of the applicant. Then we will open a public hearing and allow anyone here in attendance the opportunity to speak regarding this application. And then we, at the close of the public hearing, will bring the applicant back to address any concerns that may come out of the public hearing. And then we will take the matter back to the council, which we will discuss and then render a vote. So for CUP 18-17, staff?
Thank you. Again, this is a conditional use permit request for a private club on 10 acres at 4431 Highway P. And this is in the Flint Hill area north of Winsville, so that people know. It's zoned agricultural. I'm sorry, the current the current zoning is agricultural. Correct. Thank you. Current zoning is agricultural. The land uses around this property are all single-family residential. Although this is a 10-acre parcel, you'll notice that it's long and narrow. It's sort of like a bowling alley shape, and it has existing residences around it, but again, it is 10 acres. For the benefit of the audience, I would like to explain briefly what a private club is. There's a specific definition in our zoning regulations, and this is pertinent for tonight's consideration. So a private club is a building or portion of a building intended to be used as a center of informal association for a selective membership not open to the general public. The building could be used by persons for recreational and eating purposes, but not for dwelling purposes other than for managerial or transit lodging. So again, this would be a private club for a selective group of members, and this is, I would consider this a philanthropic organization who has a membership of 40 to 50 members, if I recall correctly, who meet periodically to hold meetings, but also one of their projects that they work on is to repair bicycles, and then they provide these bicycles to people in need for the bicycles. What they're not proposing to do, sometimes when you think of a private club, you think of entertainment, you think of a bar or other sorts of private clubs, but that's not what we're talking about this evening. They're not proposing to have a restaurant or a bar, but to hold these private organizational meetings. That's not to say that they couldn't periodically have a private gathering for their own purposes, but in this case, they're not proposing to rent out the space for weddings or other such gatherings. They're not proposing to have outdoor, anything stored outdoors. Instead, everything would be stored indoors, including the bicycles. The property is not on public sewer, so it'd have their own septic field, drain field, and have a parking lot and a building that's approximately, I think, 60 by 40. Thanks. The conditional use permit considerations are, would establishing, maintaining, or operating the conditional use be detrimental to or endanger public health, safety, or the general welfare? Would the conditional use injure the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted? Would the conditional use injure the aesthetic and or scenic values of the vicinity? Would the conditional use substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood? And finally, would the conditional use impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of a surrounding property for uses permitted in the zoning district? In this instance, if you could please skip to the last, the concept plan. In this instance, although it's a long, narrow property such that there are residences relatively nearby, for the reasons that I just cited previously about how it's going to be structured and operated, and the fact that also they propose to keep the vegetation that's existing, the mature vegetation along the borders to help provide a visual buffer or screen. For those reasons, county staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit. More specifically, county staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval for this conditional use permit with certain conditions. And the conditions would include, number 3, you'll notice occupancy shall be limited to no more than 160 persons. The reason that's recommended is based on what they've represented to us about how they want to design the building with no kitchen facility, no bar, and without sprinklers. There's a building code occupancy of no more than 160 persons. So again, even if they held a private event for themselves and invited family or whomever, it would be limited to 160 people in this building based on the building code, conceptually. So we're recommending that the conditions reflect that, or take that into account. And also, we're recommending a condition to maintain and keep those areas called out for vegetative buffers as well.
Any questions of staff?
Yes.
Robert, under the background, you have the applicant proposes constructing a gravel parking lot that's approximately 60 feet by 90 feet in size to accommodate approximately 14 parking spaces. The parking standards of the county require a private club to provide 1 parking stall per each 4 members of the club. With the number of spaces they were proposing to provide, the applicant would have sufficient parking for 56 members. In your condition number 3, maybe you can clarify this, you have occupancy up to 160 persons. Where are they going to park without violating the county standards?
If they, this is the minimum parking standard required. So if they have 56, the minimum will be 14. So if they want to have more people, more members than that, they're going to have to provide more than 14.
Why wouldn't we have the number 3 limited to the same amount of people that for the parking spots, 56 members?
You could do it that way. I mean, you could say parking for no more than 100, X number of spaces to reflect that. But what we've done is just reflected what they've represented to us in terms of how many members they're going to have, and then we indicated the minimum necessary to meet the zoning regulations.
How about wordsmithing that to, if they do increase the membership from a legalese standpoint, so that it would conform to the amount of parking places they provide? Is there a way of doing that, Mr. Hazelwood?
Mr. Commissioner, I'm sorry I was distracted
That's
for
no
a
problem.
second. But having said that,
I was just trying to conform a condition, so it's written to conform with the county standards for parking places. So if the applicant's going to provide 14 parking places for 56 members, let's say he puts another 10 parking places in, that would be another 40 members. But to rewrite that number 3 so it would reflect the amount of parking places that the applicant puts to the amount of people for the occupancy.
well, if your question is, can that be wordsmith, the answer is certainly it can. If you're going to try and make a motion this evening, I'll do what I can to craft something here in the next couple minutes. But quite honestly, I guess I would say to you that to the extent you want to make a motion, this conditional use permit process has a lot of documentation associated with it. And it may be that what you might want to do is have the motion present your verbal sense of the issue that you're taking care of with the parking, but actually let the language, the wordsmithing actually catch up in some
Well,
of
if you
that.
eliminated number 3,
Yeah.
then the implied assumption would be it would be 56 members
You're-
in the club.
Mr. Given, I think the 160 is the occupancy of the building, okay?
Yeah.
The minimum standard for a private club is we would have to have 56 parking places for members.
Right.
But if they had an event where they were going to pass out these repaired bicycles, you're going to have more than members, so I can't have more than 160 people in the building. So
Where are they going to park?
they got 10 acres.
We got lawnmower driveway.
Okay.
Does that, Gary, does that deal with your issue, or are you wanting us to try to work up some language here?
Well, I understand what Roger's saying as well, and I can understand that situation. It just seems like we have a finite number related to parking, and then over here, an open door, who's going to count if there's 160 or there's 230 people show up? I don't know.
If it would be helpful, I could just say that they're going to have to meet the parking requirements, whether they're 56 members or 100 members. And so, and that's separate from any conditional use permit condition. Let's say if they go to, again, if they go to 100 members rather than 56, they're going to have to build in that much parking to reflect that, to meet a minimum standard.
Well, as we've had some things in different wineries, brewery, and parking places, regulated to the amount of prospective customers that are going to fit in a building. It just seemed those things matched, and now I've got a mismatch here in my head. You got 56, and now you have more people in there. That's all.
But the wineries are open to the public, so the parking
Yeah.
restrictions are higher as opposed to a private club.
So why don't we
Par-
hear, why don't we
parking
hear from the
requirements.
applicant?
Yeah, I got other questions for staff first, though. As they've shown their concept plan, is there anything that would require outdoor lighting of any sort?
That would require outdoor lighting? No.
Require it first?
No.
Okay, second question then is, if they chose to have something that they would desire to have outdoor lighting, what would be the procedure to do that? Like, for example, if they wanted to have horseshoe pits, as, I don't know if these guys like to play horseshoes or not, but if they wanted to put horseshoe pits in that were lit, what would be the procedure to get approval for that, given that there are houses, residents right in close proximity?
Well, the county has a lighting standard, and so they would have to submit for an electrical permit. As part of the electrical permit process, we would ensure that it meets the lighting standard.
But it is something that a private club could do on their land. Is the proximity to households something that we look at when we issue that permit, or not?
It's more about the fixture and making sure it's pointed downward and not towards neighboring properties, and there's not light spillover, but it doesn't deal so much with proximity.
Okay.
And Mark just reminded me that I think technically under the building code, there is an exit light that's required, some sort of a lighting at an exit or entryway.
Right. I'm not worried about door lighting, but
Yeah.
would the parking lot require lights?
No, it's not required to be lit.
Okay. The site map, the preliminary site map we see here has got, curly lines that look like it's a pretty good stand of trees. The overhead satellite photo looks, and I didn't get a chance to go out to the site, but how much of a green buffer are we gonna have between the building and the whole property line along I'm not sure which direction it is, the east side?
Okay. I think Mark's pulling up photographs. One thing I didn't mention in the
Again,
presentation.
our system is terrible, so don't bother with pictures, because we can't really see it anyway. Tell us what it is.
Okay.
So the site is pretty well fully wooded, and they appear to be decent-sized trees from what I could see from Highway F, and they cover the majority of the lot. P, I'm sorry.
Okay. Would they be required to maintain a green buffer there or tree line?
Yes, they'd be required to maintain whatever width, for instance, that would be set in the conditional use permit. And typically, that's based on the concept plan. So if you wanted that to reflect what's on the concept plan here, or if you believed it should be some sort of different width, for instance.
Okay, I guess I'm not making myself understood. How big of a green space does this show? I have no scale on mine. Well, it shows 100 feet scale, so is that a 60-foot buffer that would be required to be maintained on both sides? That says 24 feet from the property line, from the building to the, yeah, I don't think it's to scale.
Yeah.
And this says 100 feet down here.
For the building. Yeah.
None of the scales on this, on the maps make any, they don't seem to make sense to me.
Okay.
It looks like 100 feet.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, just scaling it off this concept plan, it's about, I would say it's about 60 feet wide. Now, our minimum standard for buffering requirements in our zoning regulations, it provides two different options, and one of those options is a 20-foot deep option, so this would exceed that.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I have a couple questions. Now, I noticed that we do state in here that the meetings are held on the third Thursday of the month from 5 to 9. I don't see anything else in here about hours of operation or days of operation, and with the area completely surrounded by residential properties, I think that, I mean, is that something we can add in there in terms of addendums, in terms of hours of operation and times of operation?
Yes, if you relate it back to the conditional use permit criteria, then that's possible to do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, let me perhaps encourage, as you have these ideas about potential additions or amendments to the language, recollect right now, all you're dealing with is the staff's recommendation. You really don't have conditions that have officially been moved into the posture of being amended and so forth. So I'd encourage you, as you go through this, keep some notes, because when this, you need to have a starting point. So if you start with the staff recommendation conditions, you then need to be amending those when we get to that point where it's been moved and seconded.
Any other
Will
questions?
will we have any idea what this pole barn looks like?
Applicant?
60 by 90.
Okay, it's not anywhere on the...
There is an image that we have available. Let's see if we can pull it up for you. Can you see on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that about the same size?
60 by 90.
by
I don't
60.
think so.
That's not anywhere
That's
close.
I think that's the
60 by
style
90.
That's just the...
rather than the size.
3 times.
Yeah.
It's 40 by 60. No.
The distance
It's
is...
20 by 20.
Any other questions of staff? If not, we'll ask the applicant to come forward. Come right over to the podium.
May I speak to them? Or
No, you got to.
Speak to you guys?
Speak to us.
Okay.
Okay? Please raise your right hand and swear you in. You solemnly swear or affirm that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury.
yes,
Please state your name and address.
my name is Josh Grasser, and my address is 10 Old Canals Road, St. Peters, Missouri, 63376.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
So what we would like to do is, as a club, we'd like to build a building where we can hold our meetings. And we've been using borrowed space for going on 35 years now. We're founded in 1984. And we have a big bike program where we work on bikes. We're using borrowed space for that. We're using a church out in Lake St. Louis to work on these bikes and to store bikes throughout the entire year. I think in talking to some of the residents of Flint Hill subdivision, they've gathered some information from our website and from our Facebook page that is not necessarily what we'll be using this property for. We host a fundraiser that is Sporting Clays Shoot. We do that because it brings in a lot of money for us. It's a popular event, and it brings in a whole lot of money for us that we can use for helping people throughout the year. That event is held at Blackhawk in Old Monroe, and it will never be moved from there unless it goes to another Sporting Clay event. There's no way we could have this event at that property. We host just a membership drive where we have our members out to play paintball. It's not a fundraiser, it's just a fun thing that we do. We have that at Wacky Warriors there in Wentzville. That will never be moved. There's no way we could have that at this property. There's been concerns raised about our membership as far as numbers go. We handed out a brochure to some of the residents to kind of explain who we are and what we do and things like that. In that brochure, it says that our membership goes into the hundreds. Well, our membership, as far as a firm membership goes, it probably is over 100 people. Our meetings never reach more than 30 to 40 people. We've got members that show up they're charter members. They've been members for 35 years since the organization started. They don't come to anything other than our big fundraisers. So they'll never be at a meeting. That's why in my letter to the residents and then our application with you guys, we said 30, I said 30 to 40 in the letter, and I believe I said up to 45 with you guys. That is what we have at our meetings. And that doesn't change, that hasn't changed, and that's a maximum as well. There's many months where we have 15, 20 guys show up. This property, I would say most of the year, you're gonna have our meeting on the Thursday, and then the rest of the days through the week, we might have somebody out there to mow grass or something like that. It's gonna remain essentially unused. It's gonna be a place where we can store our things and not borrow somebody else's property and have our meetings. And there's a thing on our brochure as well that I'd like to address that it's on the back page, and we handed out some brochures just to show everybody what we do. There's a thing on our brochure that says, it shows a picture of a building called Squirrel Hall, and it says that we would like to someday have a food pantry and a handicap accessible playground and basically an event hall. And that is exactly what we wanted. None of our organization would make we wouldn't deny that one bit. That's exactly what we wanted, but we've wanted that forever, and the piece of property that would accommodate that, we can't afford. We've been saving for this property for 35 years, and in St. Charles County, you guys know what property goes for in St. Charles County. We can't afford that because it requires a big piece of property, and nobody's donated it to us yet. So we can't afford that. So we've adjusted our plan since that brochure was made. That brochure is a couple years old. We've changed our direction. We just want some place that we can call our own and do things like that. I think that as far as the neighbors go, I think that giving us a chance, I think they would find that we're about the best neighbors they could possibly get. we're not going to be, you defined a club. We call ourselves a club, but we're really we're a charity organization that we just call ourselves a club because that's what we say. We're not a club that gets together every Friday night and has drinking events there. That's not what we are. We're just going on my word on that, and that's all I can ask is that they would trust that we're being honest in that, and they would enjoy having us as neighbors compared to what they could have when the owner sells the property. So, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to light me up.
Anyone have any questions, Jester?
You don't have to tell us if you don't want to. Let me preface that. But 10 acres is a large chunk of ground in a residential type area for this. I guess that's when I look at this, I had some of the same concerns as the neighbors. It's an awful long. I mean, it's 1,347 feet long. That's,
Right.
You guys are, and you're sitting way back in the back part of it. Is there any plan whatsoever to develop the front?
Absolutely not. And what
You're not going to use it for anything?
there's no plan to use it for anything at this point. And the reason that is placed there at this point, and I don't want to say we threw this together as far as the drawing goes, because we did, and we put a lot of thought into it, but so we've been trying to buy this piece of property since September. The owner, Mr. James Smarco, has been less than pleasant to deal with. We found the piece of property, we made an offer to him, and then he came back with a bunch of contingencies that we couldn't deal with. So we made offers back and forth and back and forth. We finally got to a point where he took everything off the table, just kind of all at once, and we're set back. We're like, well, what happened? Why'd you do this? And so we reached out to him personally. We were dealing with his agent, his selling agent, who was also dealing with his assistant. So we didn't get to talk to him. So we write him a letter explaining who we are, what we do, and why we want his piece of property. He lets us make another offer, and this goes on a couple months. We're now well into November when this happens. And so we make this offer, and he gives us till the end of January to close. And as you guys know, the end of January from the end of November is next to impossible for us to get a permit to be able to confirm that we can do what we want to with this property, and that is have our meetings and not be told, hey, you can't have meetings here. And so when he allows us to make this offer, we then apply for the permit. We're under the assumption that we can make a sketch that says this is the building that we're going to build, and so we have one of our members draw this sketch. This is a good representation of what that building's going to look like. We're not set in stone as to where it's going to go on the property. We drew it at the back of the property because that seemed logical. We're not set in stone as to where this property goes. That is a good representation of what it looks like, though. But we did this with not much time. We had to get this turned in quickly, and so that we can meet our deadline to get this property closed on by the end of January, which still isn't going to happen, but we're hoping that he's gracious enough to extend us again. So that's essentially why that building is placed where it's at on there, because we just drew it on there. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, part of why I was wondering is you need about 3 acres, and you buy 10.
Correct.
In an area that you know, ground's not cheap, so I'm just trying, that's why I was asking the question. It seems like you've got 6 or 7 extra acres of unused ground that a charitable organization is buying, and it begged the question, well, what else are you planning for?
Absolutely.
For the front 7 acres?
So we've been looking for a piece of ground for a long time. We have to remain in St. Charles County to satisfy our charter. Ground in St. Charles County is not cheap anywhere, and we've been looking for a piece of ground for a long, long time. Have not found exactly what we wanted. Exactly what we wanted is something that's going to accommodate an event center. We can't afford that, like I mentioned before. We found this piece of property. I don't want to go into what we're paying for the property, but we found this piece of property, and it fits what we need. It is what we need it to be.
Okay. And again, I've never been.
And we don't want to.
I don't want to, you know, doubt you, but on one hand, you're saying you want to do an event center, so how can we know that you're not going to come back in a couple of years and say, well, we own this ground, we want to put an event center out in front of our lodge?
Well, it won't fit for one. I mean,
Okay.
being as narrow as it is, I think we have to stay, leave a 100-foot buffer on each side. The building that we were planning on building would not go there. It's not a prime location for an event center. When we started looking for a piece of property that would suit those needs, we wanted to be right here in St. Charles County. And that is St. Charles County, but I mean right in the heart of St. Charles County, and it just didn't work out. We've changed our path, and that's not the goal we're after anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a contract on this, or is it just word of mouth going back and forth right now?
They have, he's accepted our offer as far as what we've offered him. We've just got to, we kind of left it open to getting this done before our closing date. We haven't told him why we need to have the closing date that we do, but we just need to.
Yeah, I was just curious. We have a lot of people that come up with a potential purchase of land predicated on a zoning. I was wondering, and when it gets turned down, the sale doesn't go through.
Right.
But you have.
We haven't bought the property yet,
You haven't
no,
bought
if that's
it.
what you're asking, no.
Yeah.
No.
Do you have a contingency on it then that says if this doesn't go through?
We do
the
have
sale?
contingencies.
Okay.
We have a couple of them, yeah.
Other than your monthly meetings, would you have any other type of events or activities on this property throughout the year?
We're not planning to, no. We have a club barbecue that consists of our members, which is still those 30 to 40 members and their wives and kids. It's a family event. That is 1 month. It takes the place of our monthly meeting in July. We would probably want to have that there. Currently, that happens where we have our meetings, and there are residential homes much, much closer than any of these homes right now, and we've never, ever had a complaint.
And where are you having that meeting right now?
It's a business in St. Peters off of Boone Hills Drive.
Okay.
If this gets passed, when do you plan on breaking ground or funding for your pole barn?
As soon as possible. We would, if this gets passed, this is something that our club's excited about. We would like to repair bikes in that building for next year, is what we would like to do. So should this get passed and we say we close on the property in February, we would like to start building a building in March.
Just curious, where do you, does your charity get all these bikes? Through what venue?
We work in conjunction with the Adopt a Family program to donate them. We get donated bikes all year long. We work with St. Joachim and Ann. They're over off of Maclay and St. Peters. They have people bring bikes in there that we pick up, and a lot of times they're old, dilapidated bikes that we use for parts. Sometimes they're brand new bikes that have been donated. We've got a guy out of North Carolina, I believe, that ran into one of our members at a gas station. He was on a road trip, and the guy had a bunch of bikes in the back of his truck, and he asked what they were for, and he explained it to him. And that guy sends us a pretty hefty donation every year in support of our bike program. So that goes a long way. And then just word of mouth. People call and say, hey, I got this bike that I want to donate, or towards when it gets closer to Christmas time, we get a lot of brand new donations as well. So,
Thank you.
Great cause.
Any other questions?
Just one. What other philanthropic endeavors you guys involved in?
so we have done a number of bathroom remodels, where one example that comes to mind, we've had a girl, she was born with severe developmental issues. Bathroom or bath time for that family was the worst time of the day. It was a mess. Dad had to help her get into the bathroom, then he had to leave. Mom had to get her undressed and into the tub, and it was a bad ordeal for the whole family. The parents didn't enjoy it whatsoever, neither did she. We go in, we remodel the bathroom so that it's handicap accessible. We put a TV in there for that girl. She now loves bath time. It's her favorite time of the day. And also theirs. They like seeing their little girl happy. She's going to be dependent on them for the rest of her life. And that's one big thing we do. We've done a couple of those bathroom projects for either people who have been handicapped or have become handicapped and have no way of doing that otherwise. We also build a lot of wheelchair ramps. You wouldn't think that it's a big deal, but for somebody who's in a wheelchair, getting into the house is a big deal. So we build a lot of wheelchair ramps and we go install them. All this stuff is done at no cost to the people that we do it for.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you, Josh. Now we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak regarding CUP 18-17? Yeah.
We have some poster board with the civil engineer. We have our civil engineer and the actual presenter tonight. He had surgery this morning and couldn't make it this evening, so I'm kind of left to do the presentation.
Can't get around now.
Yeah, you're stuck up here.
I have some paperwork also that kind of goes along with this. I don't think I generated enough copies. But this paperwork is kind of what I'm going to speak to.
Okay.
And this is for you all to, I guess we need maybe a copy of for staff as well.
He's getting organized. Okay, raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings from the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I will.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jerry Co-Stevens, and I live at 2209 Flint Hill Drive. That's in Flint Hill Estates, the subdivision that borders this property.
Okay, go ahead, Jerry.
So my wife and I, Faye, we've lived in our house since 1975, 43 years. I am very familiar with this property. I have been on this property many, many times. I was invited to the property both by Dave Todd, who owned the property prior to James Smarco. And, you know, I've walked the property from one end to the other and side to side many times. And James Smarco, you know, even some years ago gave me permission, because he's away from the area, to cut firewood on it, you know, with the dead trees that were on the property. Now, what I guess I'm curious about, with all the talk about the property, did any of the commission members or the staff actually go to the property and look at this property?
I did.
Okay. And you saw...
Sir, speak to us.
Yes, okay. I'm assuming he saw what this property was. There's about 100 or so feet of fairly flat ground at the beginning there by Highway P. Then we have a pond, and after that, I mean, and down to the pond, the ground drops off very fast, and the ground becomes a ravine like this. So that from the beginning of the property down, we've got a drop of about 80 feet. And that's what's illustrated on these and in the diagrams that you have, or that some of you have, the big diagrams. I mean, it's like...
Sir, take the microphone with you. This one right
This
here.
one here? Okay.
Yeah. Make sure it's on. Tap on it. Is it?
This one?
Yeah. She'll,
It's on. It's on.
Is it on?
there you go.
As you can see from this aerial, here, right here is Highway P. The property is fairly flat here where the old buildings are. And then the property starts sloping. If you look at the contour maps, you know, that's like on 2 foot degrees, you know, as it goes down. And it starts dropping immediately. So that some of the water feeds into this pond, which is a pond as well as a wetland surrounding it. And then some of the water goes on down. By the time it gets down here, we're talking about, if you look at the numbers on there, we're talking about 80-foot difference from this flat ground up here to here. This is a ravine right here. There's trees on both sides. And it's like this. And that, I don't know if you could classify it as a jurisdictional waterway, but it would be questionable whether it would be, because along the edges of that creek there that's created, it's slab rock. The rock comes in like this. There's even a spring with a box around it, about 4x4, old concrete, where they used it to crank water out of that box to water the animals. All along that creek bed there, there's water, spring water, because it comes from the hillside to the east and west of that creek. Spring water going into that. And my contention is there is no way that they could build a building back there where they're talking about. It's impossible. If you saw it, you would know as well. It would be impossible. Where they're proposing to put in the septic area, It's like that. The grade is like that, and it's all rock. Now, there's no way that any septic contractor or the county would allow a septic system to be in that area. The only place that would be possibly buildable is up here. That's it. And then you have the issue of this wetland pond area and all the water running down here. These people that are down here, there's a creek that runs right here. And this creek comes down here and feeds into this one. This house has had water that high in it before. And it stands in there, and this whole thing fills up like a lake. Now, if we add a building and a parking lot up here, the water from here all drains down this way. So it's simply going to add to the problem. The more roof, the more parking lot, the more surface you have, the more water that's going to go down here. And I don't know if you all know what McCoy Creek and Big Creek look like at times. They back up a lot, and then this backs up in here. So, basically what I'm saying is, if you look at this, where they're proposing to build it, this is at 492. And if you look at what it is on Highway P, we're talking about 534, 536. I mean, this is an impossible location to put this building. Now, I'm going to.
While you're at the map, can I ask you
Sure.
where do you live?
Where do I live?
What lot? There's a map to your left?
Right, here's Highway P. I live
How about the one?
right here.
Are you on the one next to that?
Look to your left.
To that
This
map
one,
right
that
there.
has the
This
lots?
one here?
Yeah, what's
sure.
your number?
Right here.
What number?
2209.
What
I'm at
lot,
the back end of this.
what lot number?
2209.
2209 is our street address.
Thank you.
And as you can see on this map, Flint Hill Estates, that's all of this, surrounds this property. We have a single-family home here, single-family home here, single-family homes here. There's a new subdivision over here, single-family home here. I mean, there's single-family homes surrounding all of this area, and all of this is farm ground, agricultural. So it's either single-family homes or agricultural. We don't believe that a commercial building is suitable on this site. And if the people on the staff go
Jerry.
and look, I mean, I'd be happy to walk the ground with them. I've walked it many times.
So Jerry, I got a question
It's
for you.
impossible.
Jerry, I got a question for you. On 2209, there's 2 buildings on that property, and I didn't
Yes.
get a good look at it when I was out there.
You
What
didn't see it?
Not yours.
Okay, yeah,
And I didn't walk on the property, I just drove down.
Right.
So I didn't know it was that steep. But here's the thing, I'm looking at your property.
yes,
You've got a house up front,
right.
and you got a
And a pole
barn.
barn, yes.
What's the height difference there on those two?
There's a drainage area right here that starts right here and goes down there. These are pretty much equivalent heights.
Okay.
But there's this valley in the middle here, and you can see from this, kind of forested area here.
So
And the water-
from that last building in the back that drops off significantly from there too, back to
This
that
one?
property that's being, yes.
No, this is right along Flint Hill
Yeah.
Drive. So our house and this barn are very similar heights.
Right, I got it.
Where
No,
it drops off
Yeah, that's
is
what I
right
wanted to
here.
know. Okay.
Because, I mean, this goes down to the bottom of this area here.
And then it drops down onto that subject property that we're looking at right now.
Right here?
No, the
Oh,
property
no.
we're looking at to
Yeah,
buy.
yeah, this basically all drops into this ravine right
Okay.
here.
All right. Okay, that's what I needed.
Does the Flint Hill Estates have a homeowners association?
We don't have an official homeowners association, but in these situations, we do band together.
So would you be okay if they built on the front of the property and not in the back? on the 3 acres in
Well,
the
I
front?
think the front of the property is
Because it
still.
already has property, already has some
It's still
buildings
going
back
to present some
there.
issues. There's a building here that they're asking to, let's see, up here,
Keep.
to be retained.
Right.
It's a, I don't know if you can see this building right here.
Right.
It's an old, like the oak, the oak that you run through a sawmill, the rough. And this building is sitting, if you see, it's sitting right on the line. Now, as I understand it, anything that would be built conditional use has to be 100 foot from the property lines. So there's really only a thin area right here. There's only a thin stretch here that they should actually be building on.
Right, so again, my
And this
question,
building here that they intend to use for storage,
but Jerry,
should be used.
my question is, would you be okay if they built on the front of the lot?
I don't, no, I don't think.
So you don't want them to build?
It's not going to be pleasing to most of the people in our area
Okay,
at all.
all right, so you don't want them to do anything on the property?
No.
Okay.
This is the brochure that came to us. This is the brochure that came to us over the weekend.
Okay.
It was in our, left our mailboxes. So you can see.
Return.
that.
Yeah, why don't you go back up there,
Put
go
it on
back
the
up
overhead.
there. And let me ask you some more questions, too.
Sure. And on the back is a photo of the building that they'd like to have.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you, you don't want them to do anything on the property, basically, is what you're saying, right?
No, it's not, to me, it is not designed for that kind of use.
So what would it,
The best use for this property would be somebody to build a house.
residential?
Yeah,
Okay.
residential.
That's-
and then
that's what I
use it
wanna know.
for- Yeah, use it for maybe a couple of horses or something. I mean,
Okay.
it's like this, make a nice horse trail, but
Yeah, okay.
Now, would you agree if I built a home, I would still have the drainage issue?
if the home, well, you would never build a home down there.
No, I'm talking if I built the home
Oh,
up
if you
at
built
the
it-
front.
Sure, on the front of the property, that would be fine with all of us.
But I
And- and if
would, but
they-
I would still have the drainage issue that you brought up.
Depending, depending on where the home was built and where the water went. If it's on the flat part, some of it's a little bit of that's gonna drain towards Highway P. But then, if you get very far back, some of it's gonna go to the pond, and then some of it's gonna go down to the neighbors down in the creek valley.
Okay.
And I'm sure that the Loyal Order of Squirrels, they do some good work, but the neighbors in Flint Hill Estates and the other single-family homes around there do not believe, that this property deserves to have a commercial-type building with parking lots. And then what happens 5 years down the road if they decide to stop doing what they're doing, and now the property, we've already got this commercial building sitting up there, and what's it gonna be turned into? Retail shops or what?
No, I
You know?
can't do that.
Can't.
Can't do that.
Yeah. So that's, but getting rid of the old buildings, that would be a good thing for all of us. But, what it's gonna go to after that, no, I don't think we can agree with that. But, if you take a real good look at this contour map, that's gonna tell you pretty much the whole story about the property. And if you come and take a look, at the property, you'll see for yourself. Nobody in their right mind would put a building at the back of the property, it has to be in front of the property.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, yep. Jerry, give us our mic back. County can't afford to replace that.
I understand. You want these up here or do you?
Is there anyone else coming to speak regarding this?
Does the applicant want to?
You can take them down.
You
if they're
can
for
take them down if you want
Yeah.
to.
You can just leave them like right up in front like they're doing here if you want. If the other person wants to use them, they can.
Okay, anyone else? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Carol Mers, 2120 Flint Hill Drive, Wentzville. And I did send in an email, and I was one who had questioned, and I'm assuming all of you saw the email that was sent in, but I was the one who had questioned about the information that they had put on the back of their brochure as far as them raising money for their building, what their building would be used for. And Mr. Grasser said this evening that they've kind of taken a different path at this time. My problem is, and this is with a lot of us in the subdivision, is that once you open this up to them, how do we know they're not going to change to a different path? And that's a big concern. You know, that's going to drop our property values because they can come back to you again and say, this is what we want to do with our property. You know, and so for us, where does it stop? And that is a big concern with that. It will lower our property values. And then it's also going to take away from what our aesthetic and scenic values are as far as what Mr. Coe-Stevens showed you as far as the layout of the property and where the building could possibly be put at. And then what he brought up tonight, too, is that he's talked about the membership being around 40 members, but he said there's also charter members and that they probably are into the hundreds. And he said that there's a lot of excitement going on in this group right now with the possibility of this going on, and I understand all of that. So are these charter members then going to start showing up at meetings because they've got this brand new building now? These charter members that started this and what they were fighting for also, are they going to start coming to the meetings? Are they going to be at the barbecues with their spouses and their family? And how many more people will that add to it? Certainly those 14 parking spaces are not going to take care of that if that's what their actual membership is. So I just am respectfully asking you to deny their request for this conditional use permit.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Gentlemen?
You solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, sir.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Joanne Youngerman, 2250 Flint Hill Drive, Wentzville, Missouri, 63385.
Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
Thank you. Now, I'm a bit nervous. I grabbed the wrong paper. We had a meeting of our Flint Hill Estates subdivision on Monday night to kind of gather our thoughts. And I had already sent an email to the committee, and the Flint Hill Estates residents asked me if I would relay this in front of you as the commissioners and also the public at large. So I'm just going to read my comments, if that's okay. My name is Joanne Youngerman. My husband Chuck and I have owned lot number 10 of Flint Hill Estates subdivision for over 40 years. The first and only notice that we saw of this conditional use permit 18-17 was the sign on the property along Highway P on December 7. We and several of the 25 lot owners in Flint Hill Estates who live more than 500 feet from the Smarco property had not received any written communication advising us of the intended usage by the Loyal Order of Squirrels. The only information that we have gotten has been from the few neighbors who are within that 500-foot boundary. This is really kind of unacceptable to all of us as landowners and taxpayers in Flint Hill Estates, who will all of us be adversely affected by the proposed usage. We feel we deserve proper notification from the county, respectfully. We are approximately 520 feet from the Smarco property, but we physically can see it from our home, and all of this wastewater runoff from their proposed septic field pole barn parking lot will be running through the dry creek that Jerry referred to beside our home. And we all kind of resent the fact that this hearing is being rushed through with such inadequate notice to all the residents of Flint Hill Estates. For most of us, this is the busiest time of year. It's less than a week before Christmas. So I'm very happy to see a wonderful turnout of all of our Flint Hill Estates residents. On Saturday, the two Loyal Order of Squirrels members made an after-the-fact attempt to contact a few of us Flint Hill Estates residents. They spoke to a few, handed out just the letter, and distributed to the other neighborhood mailboxes within that 500-foot radius an unaddressed, unstamped envelope containing a letter dated December the 15th with their printed brochure. Now, if this brochure is outdated, why was it included? I mean, that brochure threw up a red flag to all of us with the depiction on the back especially. So we note three major documents. We note major discrepancies between these documents. And I know that I don't want to repeat, but I've got to read this. The Squirrels' December 15th letter, along with their brochure, and respectfully, the county staff recommendation. So really, how many members do they actually have? This has been discussed already. I'm sorry. The Squirrels' letter states 30 to 40 active members. The brochure states our ever-growing membership counts in the hundreds. And the staff recommendation states approximately 45 members, with proposed parking to accommodate 14 spaces. This is based on the calculation of one parking stall for each 4 members, or sufficient parking for 56 people. This has provided everybody carpools, and that's unrealistic in today's environment. The next point, what is the ultimate intended usage and capacity of the proposed 40 by 60-foot pole barn? The Squirrels' letter states, since our founding in 1984, our club has been saving for and looking for a place to build our own clubhouse to have our monthly meetings, work on and store bicycles, and store our belongings that we use for our fundraisers. Brochure states, we store wheelchairs, canes, and wheelchair ramps for distribution. And plus the brochure on the back shows the picture of Squirrel Hall and states, we are currently raising money for our building. The building will be used to maintain our mission along with providing a handicap-friendly play area. There's only one handicap parking space in their proposal. A designated disaster relief location, bike and elder care material storage, a food pantry, and a community event center. That's associated with this Squirrel Hall. So you can see our concern, a 40 by 60-foot pole barn versus this community center. And then the staff recommendation states, the applicant simply intends to construct a 40 by 60-foot pole barn, and they intend to use the building as meeting space and as workspace for the repairing of bicycles. The staff recommendation also states about the occupancy. That was another concern. Occupancy shall be limited to no more than 160 persons. So the numbers just don't add up. If the membership is in the hundreds, does this mean that their proposed pole barn and 14-space parking lot is really not even already up to specs? It's very confusing. And then the site plan with the picture of the site plan showed the 40 by 60-foot pole barn, and it was supposed to be used for a meeting once a month, and the charity bicycle program. That's wonderful. And it's going to be used to store bicycles. But then it also says occasional organizational events. Well, we're asking what events? What events? So our question is, if there are this many discrepancies found comparing just 3 pieces of documentation, what really is going to happen in the future if this organization buys this property? So it seems to us, as Flint Hill Estates residents, that the applicant intends to do a lot more on this property than is really being stated. A 40 by 60-foot pole barn and 14 parking spaces to do bicycle repair. Their Facebook page, I know it's social media, but it's out there. Their Facebook page shows postings of their annual clay shoots, paintball, trivia night. This barn raiser, in their own letter, says attracts close to 600 attendees each year, with sponsor recognition over the loudspeaker throughout the day. We don't want hundreds of people driving vehicles back and forth on this property behind our beautiful homes and sheds or in Flint Hill Estates. That gives the opportunity to theft, vandalism, trespassing, starting fires, throwing trash and beer cans anywhere. We don't want our property values declining, which it will happen. It will happen. Or our safety threatened because of guns shooting, the possibility, paintball pellets, loudspeakers, vehicle noise, light poles, lights destroying any kind of night view, drunken disorderly behavior, major traffic on Highway P, and that's a dangerous highway anyway, or anything else that a private club brings. We love our quiet, safe, clean, rural, single-family residence subdivision. When we bought our property 40 years ago, the only thing we heard was bird singing. And 40 years later, that's still the only thing we really hear. It's quiet, it's wonderful. We want to keep it that way. If we wanted to live by a private club, we would have purchased property in town many years ago. If this was your home, I'm asking you, and your neighborhood, wouldn't you feel the same way as we, the residents in Flint Hill Estates, do? The Smarco property is residential, and it needs to stay residential. It's within Flint Hill Estates boundaries. As taxpayers and county landowners, we residents of Flint Hill Estates respectfully urge all of you to vote no against this CUP 18-17. The Loyal Order of Squirrels is an admirable charitable organization, but it's not right for Flint Hill Estates. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I did have one. You said that it was within the Flint Hill
It is.
boundaries. So do you have covenants? Is this part of the covenant area of your subdivision?
It is not a
Okay.
parcel of Flint Hill Estates.
Okay,
It was
okay, it's
left
not,
out
okay.
in the original Gundeker Dean Jackson real estate.
Okay.
But we do, every piece surrounds it, and on the south side is Highway P.
Okay.
But all of Flint Hill Estates is north of Highway P.
Right. Okay, thank you.
No homeowners association, I asked.
We don't enforce it. I mean, we don't have fees or homeowner associations, no. We do have rules. I'm not up to speed. Excuse me.
Yeah, anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anyone else? You solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Wayne Oberdike, 2195 Flint Hill Drive, Wentzville, Missouri.
Go ahead, Wayne.
A couple things have come up. They wanted me to come here and talk about some financial issues. Some things have been covered, some things not. But something that has come up is a neighborhood covenants. And when my wife and I moved into this neighborhood 17 years ago, one was presented to us. It's 3 pages long. It goes into great detail about the way buildings should be built in that area, their height, their dimensions, what the land can be used for, et cetera. Now, it has dates on it. Some lawyer would have to look at that and determine whether it's still accurate. It makes mentions that gets renewed every 10 years automatically unless somebody steps in and changes it. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but we do have covenants. So I think that maybe we should present that somehow and keep our buildings built within those guidelines. What I brought up to the members here, our neighborhood, is that any real estate agent will tell you that location is the primary generator of the value of your home. Any one of us could build a house, make it as nice as we want, but if we put it next to a bicycle repair shop and a potential food pantry, it's not going to be worth much. That's what they're trying to do here, is put a bicycle repair shop in the middle of our neighborhood. That isn't going to work for us. It's going to lower our home values potentially by a large amount. That's not what we want for our neighborhood. I don't know what else to say other than that. It's very obvious that this is not designed, this property was not designed to have a commercial site there. I think the organization is wonderful. Frankly, although after this conversation they wouldn't allow me, I wouldn't mind assisting them. I'd like to be part of their organization. But like any of us, we don't want that in the middle of our neighborhood. It's just that simple. The costs to us are going to be too great. That's really all I have to add. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone else wanting to speak?
Can I make an additional comment?
I'll defer to him first.
No, come on. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Jean St. Clair from 2123 Flint Hill Drive, Wentzville, Missouri, 63385.
Go ahead, Jean.
Okay, you've seen this map. I live right here. The gentleman that just spoke lives right here. My neighbor lives there. This is actually 2 lots. He is built on one. He could potentially, should he decide, sell. So that's going to put this lot right there. This is the subject property. One thing that was not stated, or no one has brought up, was in their original application to you, it indicated that these were just residences. These are platted parts of Flint Hill Estates, all the way around. The screening, they're saying that there's a complete wooded screening all the way around this property, about a third of my backyard, and most of this property is not. So we've had visibility of the old buildings all along, but I don't want to, if they move it to the front, I don't want to look at that every time I'm in my backyard, which is frequently. So that's sort of, I also think that I know the property was $350,000 initially. That's an awful lot for a charitable organization to pay for a 40 by 60 building and a parking lot to repair bikes. And what are they going to want to do in the future? Because once they repair bikes there, we have lost. So we really want to keep our lifestyles. We're residential. That piece of property should be. That's it.
Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else wishing to speak? You have one comment, Jerry?
Do I need to come up again?
Come up. Hold on, Arnie, you'll be next. Oh,
You may-
No, you already
Okay.
sworn in.
All right. I just wanted to mention, I should have, this was what the civil engineer put together, since he couldn't attend. So he has more information on this than I went into. And one thing that, if it was done in the back, he estimated 40% of the trees would have to be removed, and roughly 5,000 cubic yards of fill would need to be imported in the back. But there's other details on this two-page that I passed out that might be, of some importance
Okay.
to you.
Thank you.
So that's basically it.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, public advocate and resident. My mailing address is P.O. Box 1535 in O'Fallon. First of all, this sounds like a great organization, the Squirrels. They do a lot of good community-oriented organization and do a lot of good for our community and our county. I would imagine that they're probably a 50C3 exempt status through the U.S. Department of Revenue in terms of exempt status. I would imagine that their real estate and personal property will now be exempt and they will not be paying any sort of county taxes. There are some questions about proper notice of the adjoining property owners. If you did read in the packet, there were several emails from homeowners of the Flint Hill estates that have questions of not being properly notified of this public hearing and the hearings before the county council. My question is, has county staff notified the village of Flint Hill in terms of these proceedings and the zoning, as state statute requires county government or any jurisdiction within 1 mile of the borders of a municipal government that they must notify that government? Other property owners within this area, we have a 500-foot rule where all those properties adjoining this property of question in the application, were they properly notified? Was proper notice given, is my question. Did the village of Flint Hill request a remonstrance in our county charter and state statute? If it's within 1 mile of the borders of a municipal area, that governmental jurisdiction can ask for remonstrance of county government, which would necessitate 5 out of 7 county council members voting in the affirmative. So to the people in the audience, I would contact your elected officials in the village of Flint Hill, get them to pass a resolution or an ordinance to send to the county registrar, which is known as the county clerk, so the county council will have to have a supermajority of 5 out of the 7 county council members for passage. Has the Army Corps of Engineers been contacted, since there's a draining issue, there's a creek, and there's water issues in this area? That's a major concern. I want to make sure that this property is treated fairly like we've treated other properties of the same existence that have come before the commission for conditional use permits in the number of preceding months this year. The conditions in the wine district, rural restaurants, wineries, clubs, and a brewery. I want to make sure that there's a condition placed on here that states no outside music past 8:00 p.m., like you have in the wine district and other rural areas in our county. I want to make sure that there's a condition that no audible amplified music or noise on the property after 8:00 p.m., like you put that standard and condition on other rural restaurants and a brewery and other private clubs. I want to make sure that there's a condition that any operation of this club cease at 10 o'clock PM, like you've put that same restriction on other private clubs in our rural districts. And make sure that there's a maximum capacity, which I think that the staff said was 160 people, as you put on other private clubs and other entities in the rural district. That no gun shooting be allowed on this property shall be a #1 condition. That's a major concern when they're talking about holding fundraisers. So let's squash that right away. I'd ask that you as commissioners put that condition, that no shooting activities be allowed on this property for the endurance of the conditional use permit. It sounds like there needs to be a buffer and a berm needed. As was testified by the previous speaker, it looks like only 2/3 of the property has a forest area, and it can be seen from the homes in Flint Hill Estates. So there needs to be a buffer. I haven't heard staff mention anything about a buffer, landscaping, or a berm, as you have in other conditional use permits in rural districts throughout our county in the last 4 months that have come before you as a commission. That there be a condition to ensure that the forest area remains, it is not disturbed in any way. I don't see where staff has recommended that condition. You're talking about homes in this area of Flint Hill Estates that start at $350,000 and go probably up to $750,000 to $800,000. You want to ensure that these home property values are intact and that these people aren't going to lose any of their value on resale. Parking has come up, and there's way fewer spots. Staff recommends 14. I recommend 100 parking spots because, as you could tell by the testimony from both the applicant and their brochure and their letter, it sounds like they have some activities that could be between 160 to 200 participants. So I'm asking you put a mandatory condition that they put a 100 parking lot facility on this property. And one handicap spot is not going to do it. They have to meet the traffic code of developing properties to anticipate any handicapped people to meet the demands of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I take that very seriously. I think there needs to be 4 or 5 handicap spots, and there is a code that we have in our county code of ordinances. And finally, the dust from the gravel driveway and the gravel parking lot. These people paid $350,000 to $750,000 for their homes. They deserve to have a paved parking lot of this magnitude. For them to have 100 cars going up and down these gravel driveways, creating dust for these homes in this residential neighborhood is just ridiculous. You mandate that in other parts of the county, and I ask that you put a condition that the parking lot must be paved in accordance with our codified county code of ordinances. This will eliminate dust of the adjoining subdivision, and I think it's the only proper thing to do. So I ask that you take those conditions very seriously. I think these residents were here first. They deserve those conditions. Don't treat this property any differently than you've treated the other applicants that have come before you in the last 6 months. You've put those conditions on other people. Let's not discriminate. Let's make sure that we're on an even keel playing field, and let's make sure that you represent the residents here. And to the residents out there, I ask that you contact the village trustees of the Village of Flint Hill, ask them to pass a ordinance or a resolution, get it as soon as possible to the county register, who is Brenda Hitton, on the 5th floor of the county office building right below us here, to create a supermajority of the county council, which would make that necessitate to be passed. Thank you very much.
Mr. Dinoff, you do understand this is not a rezoning request?
Yes, I understand.
It's just a conditional use permit. We're not changing the zoning from agricultural?
I thought that you were changing it from agricultural
No,
to...
this is just a conditional use permit
Okay,
in the agricultural zone.
okay.
You understand that?
I understand that now.
Okay.
But some of the previous testimony kind
Well,
of sounded like they were asking for a zoning change to
No,
do certain
this is no zoning,
conditions.
this is no zoning change. Now, the other thing, do you understand the conditions that you quoted, the prior CUPs from the last several months? Those were all public commercial businesses, where this is a private club that's not open to the public and doing anything for sale.
What about the winery club that you limited to 30 people, 30 guests down in the rural area of Augusta that was outside the city limits?
That
You
was.
put a number of restrictions on that in the last
That was,
6
the
months.
winery club was about a year ago, and that was size of the building. Same with 160 people occupancy the size of this building. But those other restrictions you quoted, that was because those facilities were commercial, open to the public, okay? This is a private club, not open to the public.
Well, then we need to change our county code of ordinances, because a private club, there's no difference between a private club and a private party center we've opened up, 10 of those in the last 6 months.
Those
in
are
rural
open to the
areas.
public.
Correct.
This is not.
This
I know.
is not open to the
You
public.
need to ensure and protect the property values of these residents behind me. For you to not put these proper conditions would be ludicrous, it'd be bad government practices, and I'd be opposed to
Just making
it.
sure you understand so you're not confusing the audience. Thank you very much.
I do understand, but you also have to understand that the testimony, it sounds like they're asking for a rezoning.
Anyone else? Anyone else? You solemnly swear or affirm that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Mike Gorman, 4349 Highway P, Wentzville, Missouri.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I'm one of the homeowners in the area. A lot of information, has been assembled. A lot of it's been assembled in a hurry. I don't think this is a well thought out application. I think there's a lot of variables that are not being disclosed fully. I would recommend, with the discrepancies that were discussed earlier, that we look at everything carefully. And in my view, from what I understand from the application, there's a lot of misleading points that needs clarification, and I think they needed to resubmit. This is my opinion. I work in a regulated environment where things have to be spelled out, and everything has to connect and be crystal clear. This application isn't.
Any questions, Mike? Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else? Anyone else wishing to speak regarding this application? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Ask the applicant to come back if you so choose. Anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Do you have, like, different chapters of your group throughout the St. Louis area? Or
No,
is this
no,
it?
this is it. We're one group and that's it.
It seems like there's a lot of discrepancy about the number of members,
And I can see that, and I fully, and our club fully understands the concerns of the residents there at Flint Hill. And I understand where that discrepancy comes into play, because we did put that brochure out. We have not wanted to spend the money to redo that brochure, so we use our funds elsewhere. I use that brochure as just a piece of information to show what we do with the residents that we went around and introduced ourselves to. It does say that we have over 100 members, and like I said before, we probably do. But those members we haven't seen a lot of those members in 20 years. Our active membership that comes to things is 30 to 40. And most of the time, our active membership that shows up to things is less than that. We're a completely volunteer group, and it's hard to get people to volunteer for things. So our membership is fairly small.
You guys have to get financing for your building, outside financing?
I mentioned before, we have been saving for this building for our entire existence. Back when the organization very first started, their vision was to have their own place instead of having to borrow a place. To answer your question directly, no, we don't.
Okay.
We use our funds to to help as many people as possible. But for 35 years, we've been putting money away to do this, so.
Who will,
Yes.
I agree with everybody and what you said. I think the organization is great. Just a question, because we've had, when you hear a lot of opposition, we've had daycare centers put into, they want to put them in a residential area. And when you have a lot of residents, you know, which obviously nobody here is for it. And my question is, and I know you said land is very expensive in St. Charles County. It is, but also there are a lot of good deals out there. I live in an agricultural area. Sometimes you can find land if you're at the right time, at the right place, $15,000 an acre, $25,000. It's looking. And a lot of the other people, since we've grown in population, the landowners want to get as much as they can. I know in our area, land can go $150,000 an acre. But just down the road, you can find something less expensive. So my question is, and originally I asked if it was a contingent, you haven't closed the deal on this. If this doesn't pass, you might want to take a look at other places where you're not going to be conflicting with other residents. There's a lot of agricultural areas, and maybe you could get some more land than what this is, the 10 acres, and with some future expansions, some things that you wanted to do. Just a thought.
Thank you.
no, it's closed, public hearing is closed, sorry, sir. Who will have access to this proposed building?
It'll be only our membership, and it'll be, as far as access, do you mean?
I mean, will there be keys or a keypad? Can I come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and repair some bikes on my own, or?
We haven't discussed specific details as far as that regard yet, but this won't be a place that people just have willy-nilly, so to speak, access to. This is going to be a place that we use for our meetings, and a place that is used for bicycle repair. There's probably going to be a handful of people that have keys to it. I guess to answer your question as to, is there going to be a keypad where every single member gets their own key code to get in and can come and go as they please? That is not what we're trying to do.
Did you, in the area, we've heard about the drainage and the drop in the topography there. Did you have any kind of engineer take a look at what you're proposing in terms of the building and the runoff and any kind of, I guess, soil sampling to find whether the septic system would, what the runoff fields would be, and also anything about the tree clearing around there?
We've not done that. We haven't had any engineers look at it yet. Like I mentioned before, we kind of placed that building just to get it on paper and get it in to meet Mr. Smarko's deadline, so to speak. We're not married to putting the building in the back. There's other buildings existing on the property, so.
You know, though, if we've approved this, one of the conditions will probably be that it matches the proposed site plan. That'll be a condition of the conditional use permit. So you won't be able to change things, you know.
Once you've done it, yeah.
A little bit here and there, yes. I mean, we understand there's no engineered drawings yet, but you're not going to be able to go from the back all the way up to the front. That's not going to be something that's available to you.
And from the back all the way to the front, I mean, that piece of property is a very long piece of property, and I mean, it's not a cliff back there, so if we have a little bit of a variance.
Yeah. Mr. Co-Stevens did talk to an engineer. The engineer sent a letter in saying that there's upwards of 5,000 cubic yards of fill that would be needed. Is that something that you guys contemplated on how to do this?
That's not something that we discussed yet. Like I said, we had very little time here as well,
Okay.
dealing with Mr. Smarko and
Your plan shows the septic field being higher than the building. And there's one thing the plumbers have taught me a long time ago is everything
flows
tends to
downhill.
go downhill.
Like I mentioned before, we didn't have that professionally done. That was, and what we were asked to do and how our application got approved was essentially a sketch. They asked us to put on paper what we were wanting to do.
Right.
And so we did not have that professionally done. I'll be 100% candid with that.
Sure.
And
No, we don't require that. I'm not saying that we do, but it's got to, make some degree of sense too.
Right.
Building on the side of a cliff or even if there's as much rock exposed as what I've been led to believe, it's going to be a difficult building site. So you guys have contemplated that and you've got that built in?
We were kind of led to believe that it was just a sketch that we needed to provide. So I didn't know that we were married to putting that building exactly in that location.
Robert, would they be able to move the building to the front of up near Highway P when I say the front?
Well, the conditional use permit regulations provide very clear guidance on what county staff could do versus what would require an amendment to the conditional use permit. And the ordinance is written such that for changes in building locations, the wording is that it could be minor changes to the orientation or location of the building could be approved administratively by the Director of Community Development, but changes beyond that would have to be an amendment to a conditional use permit.
And then come before us again. Correct?
Right. And amendments come before this body and then the county council for review and approval or disapproval.
And again, I'm getting back to the January timeframe, that would be difficult to get all that accomplished and still allow you guys to close on a piece of property.
Right.
So,
Sounds like your James Marco is giving a little difficult task for you guys.
He hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
So you got other people beating the door down to buy this property, other than you?
I don't know that. Obviously, their realtor is not going to disclose that to us. But he has entertained our offer, and that's why we're trying to get this.
Sounds to me like he just he hasn't given you enough time to go through all the steps you have to go through here. And all the.
He hasn't really.
Well,
Any other questions for the
Have you really addressed they're talking about you guys having your barn raiser, your clay shooting there. I mean, I heard that from Joanne.
And
you're not doing that, is that correct?
And absolutely not. Our barn raiser is our biggest fundraiser of the year. It does attract, we sell 300 tickets. Every ticket gets 2 people in the door, and we sell out every year.
Where is that?
We hold that at the American Legion Hall here in St. Charles.
So you need a big hall for that?
Yes, absolutely. The building that we would build there would never accommodate that many people, and there's no way we could have it there. Our sporting clay shoot, we do that at a location that we wouldn't want to take on that kind of liability to have an event like that.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll bring this back to the commission. Any discussion, comments, questions? Questions of staff?
Yeah, I guess my thought is that it seems like a really great organization. I think there's too many questions that have been raised that need to be addressed prior to voting in favor of it, myself. That's my opinion.
And my comments, I address back to Josh with this much opposition. I just think it's a great organization, but I think maybe a better location for it would be in the future. And then dot the i's and Cross the Ts before you come before us.
I'm honestly, I'd be in favor, if they're in favor of pushing this to another meeting, instead of voting on it up or down on this for you guys, because, you can see kind of the dynamics are going on here, that you're gonna have to go back to James Smarko and ask for more time, so you can do this right. Because we're having a hard time with this ourselves, and listen, I know your organization, I used to be involved in it, I think it's great. I'd love for you to have this facility, but I'm having a problem with it, and I think you guys are great, so just letting you know. So do we need I guess,
Three commission members can request for an item to be continued. Doesn't have to go to a vote.
The applicant requested also. I mean, that's the common way.
They can.
yeah, usually
If
the
there's more
applicant
questions,
asks for
then-
that continuation, so I don't know if you guys want that or not, or if you want us to, why don't you come back up, I'm sorry. Let's do that right. I'm gonna ask you the question and then ask you what you wanna do. Would you be okay with this being continued? So you'd have more time to do this right and come before us one more time?
And in doing that, can I get, is there any kind of letter from you guys that I would get, that I would be able to present to him? Or is it just, I got to tell him word of mouth?
Public record.
It's public record, the notification would be, you could tell him they've continued it on me. I can't, they wouldn't vote on it. But I want you to ask for this, otherwise I'm gonna vote on it one way or another.
Okay.
If you don't want to continue it.
I think you really need to convince the homeowners behind you that the perception that they have, and partially because of the information you sent out, and what you're intending is two different animals. And I need to be assured too that this thing is as you state it's gonna be, and not what they're concerned about. That I think you really need to talk to them some more. That's
Okay.
my.
Yep.
Right, you've defined a very narrow use of it, but you've shown a much wider use. I think it has to be presented as a very narrow use.
Yeah, my concern is that you take this pot of money that you've saved for 35 years to buy this land, but you haven't investigated what it's going to cost to total cost to build a building, which may involve drainage issues, septic tank issues, fill, and you do that and then say, we're short, and now you have all your money in this 10 acres, and then you're stopped.
Yeah.
Because that's where all your money's at. That's a concern that I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you like us to do?
I would ask then that we continue this. And I would suggest to the folks behind me that we're absolutely open to speak with everybody.
Staff, do we need to do anything, or since the applicant has asked us to hold it, is that all that's necessary to procedurally move forward with the next item on the agenda?
I think you've got to vote on it.
We got to vote on it.
Okay, I make a motion then that we continue this until the next meeting.
Motion's been made to continue CUP 18-17. Do I have a second?
Second.
Let's see, I'll have to record this. Mr. Griffin, how do you vote?
No.
No? Mr. McBride?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Cleary?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Fromm?
Yes.
Mr. Coon?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries to continue application CUP 18-17 to the January meeting, which is the 16th, I believe, isn't it?
I don't have the date, right? I think you're right.
January 16th.
Third Wednesday.
It's the 16th.
It is, 16th.
16th.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the November 21st, 2018 meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor of approving the November 21st regular meeting minutes, sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been approved. And now we have other business, but we'll wait till a few minutes here. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah, they need to work at it. We're doing
Pardon? No, we're taking a recess. Yeah. Mr. Kuhn need to go to the restroom. So 5-minute recess. Hope that wasn't on. Hope that didn't show up on TV. A youngster like you? How could you think about this? What are you gonna do with yourself? Home Depot or something? Walmart. I wasn't too ugly. I just couldn't. I was talking to him this afternoon, getting ready, and I told him that Brad Goss is looking for an associate. It's like oil and water. You know, I just couldn't resist myself with Arnie tonight. Just couldn't resist myself. Connection. Yeah, because I'm in favor of starting early. I'd like to actually have an opportunity to go. Mr. Kuhn's not back? Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Everybody take their seats. And can we get someone to ask them to
At least close the door. Lock them out.
Yeah. The next thing on our agenda is a review of the proposed 2030 master plan for St. Charles County. So, Mr. Meyer, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Robert Myers. I'm the Planning Zoning Division Manager for St. Charles County. And this item is an opportunity to review and comment on the land use component of the 2030 master plan as recommended by the county's master plan steering committee. So here tonight, we have 3 steering committee members that I can see. First and foremost, Nancy Matheny is the chair of the master plan steering committee. We have Michael Herbert, who's also the director of community development department. And then finally, we have Mike Klinghammer, Planning and Zoning Commissioner, County Council member, but also Master Plan Steering Committee member. The master.
Here, let's take a break. And
You're going to make that happen, are you?
I was on it.
Yeah, I knew.
Yeah.
excuse me.
Ask us staff.
Now, listen, if that was,
Give him hell, Roger.
Good job, Roger.
Thank you.
Good job.
I'll get them moving.
Someone with strong lungs, sir. Thank you. Again, the Master Plan Steering Committee was appointed by the county executive with the consent of the county council in April and May of this year. You may know that the Master Plan Steering Committee is charged with preparing a master plan, making recommendations to the county council for this countywide master plan. But also, the Master Plan Steering Committee, the master plan needs to be reviewed each 5 years. 2018 is that time. 2018 is within the 5 years since our last master plan review in 2013. So currently, what we use is this 2025 master plan. What's recommended is a draft 2030 master plan. So the committee was appointed, and their first meeting was in May. And again, by county charter, it's to be reviewed each 5 years. So the charge was to take a review in 2018. At the first Master Plan Steering Committee meeting, 21 members, by the way, first Master Plan Steering Committee meeting, it was decided or agreed upon that the approach to this master plan would be an amendment to the 2025 master plan, or refreshing, whatever you might want to call it, but not a total rewrite. And very quickly, the main reason for that is because the decennial census numbers that we use are critical for what we do. The last decennial census was in 2010. The next one's in 2020. They'll be releasing the detailed results down to the block level of the 2020 census in probably 2022. So 5 years from now, we should have very detailed demographic information down to the block level that we could use for a basis. Right now, we use something called the American Community Survey, but frankly, those numbers are, there's a margin of error that sometimes we just work with what we have. But anyway, that was the approach to decide upon at the Master Plan Steering Committee, the first one. And they met monthly between May and November, and reviewed section by section our county master plan and prepared a recommendation to go forward to the county council. Now, I would say the master plan has a lot of different components or elements, and those components or elements are provided by county charter, and they're very broad. A lot of them has little to do with land use. For instance, education. There are other components in social services. Those aren't necessarily land use related, but by county charter and by county ordinance, it says the master plan is to address these issues. Now, the jurisdiction, I would say, of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we're asking that you review the land use components of this master plan and provide any feedback that you would care to, or recommendations to the county council, so that when the county council receives this draft master plan, they also have the benefit of any recommendations that you might have, because you all are definitely experts in land use and future land use. So we wanted to get your input. As part of the considerations, a series of focus group meetings were held. These focus group meetings consisted of practitioners in the subject areas that were part of the master plan. For instance, we met with transportation folks, natural resources, et cetera. We got their recommendations and input. Those were fed into the the Master Plan Steering Committee's recommendations. A public open house was held, and then finally we got outside technical input, including such things as the master plans from the different jurisdictions, the municipalities, O'Fallon, Wentzville, Lake St. Louis. Those communities have their own future land use maps, the master plans, and ours incorporates those. We don't have the jurisdiction for land use within their communities, but we are reflecting what their recommendations are for their own land use decision-making in their communities. Our master plan incorporates that and recommends it. By the way, we're the only organization or jurisdiction that does this sort of county-wide look where we're trying to look at the whole picture. All the different jurisdictions, the municipalities or cities, their purview is just within their own community. We're providing a broad brush picture. With that, you'll see that the master plan future land use recommendation is just that. It's a very broad brush look at future land use. And as you saw tonight, this future land use mapping, there's no way that we could take into consideration every single parcel within the county-wide and think about all the different site considerations for that. So I mentioned that just because, again, in the context, it is a very broad brush tool that we use as part of our consideration. The role of county staff has been to provide technical and organizational support for the work of the Master Plan Steering Committee, and we drafted documents for the review. We updated statistics and facts, and we updated using the same methods and assumptions where possible. What I mean by that is, again, the approach was decided we're not going to throw out the master plan and start over again. We wanted to use the same basis for the 2030 master plan as we did the 2025. So we very carefully tried to use the same approaches, the same assumptions that we did with the 2025 master plan, and update the statistics and the numbers. I'm going to skip over parts of this because of in the interest of time, but I would like to say that, let's see, I'm sorry, back up one bit. Covered this. Also, I should mention that as part of the technical and organizational support that the county staff has provided, we're looking at creating for the first time an interactive online master plan. A lot of times people think of a plan as a paper document, or you might think of it as a PDF that's posted online that people can review. But how cool would it be to have the master plan where it's interactive, where it's not necessarily linear, but you could follow your interest to the level of your own interest into, so that's what we're close to creating online is this interactive 2030 master plan that's now in draft form. So we're still working on this and finalizing, but even after the 2030 master plan is adopted, we feel like it could be a great educational tool so that people can learn for themselves and really understand what is a master plan and what its components are. The components generally are looking back, conditions and trends, but it's also looking forward, future land use, transportation networks, and vision, goals, and objectives. So the vision and goals and objectives, just so you'll know, the 2030 master plan, as well as the current one, for each component of the master plan, such as housing, land use, transportation, and the economy and economic development, each component has a vision and it has a goal and strategies under those goals. And so the Master Plan Steering Committee, because they're really the experts on community values, they provided updated vision, goals, and objectives as part of this process. So the vision, goals, and objectives have been changed in some circumstances, but not for all of the chapters. And another component, again, is this future land use map that we talked about briefly, and we'll cover more in a moment. I'm going to skip over much of the background information because we have this provided as a, some of it is provided in the written plan, but we also have a much more involved appendix that provides the basis for how this was really created. But I would say that we're projecting that by 2030, our population is going to grow to about 470,000 residents countywide. And I could get into the details of how that's achieved, but basically it's what's called the core survival method, which is basically births minus deaths. And we also factor in migration as well. We use accepted principles for how to estimate future population. Population itself is also changing. It's aging, for instance. We have information on how the population is changing. We have employment projections overall and by sector. And there's more information on the plan. And we also look at transportation as well. And it may surprise some people to know about that 62% of St. Charles County workers commute outside of St. Charles County to go to work. Now, that has an impact on a couple of things, but one of them is transportation, absolutely. Commuting patterns. I sometimes think of commuting as a symptom, as an imbalance between jobs and housing. So one of the things the plan would like to address, or attempts to address, is how can we create the right balance between jobs and housing in St. Charles County for a number of reasons, but including in order to improve transportation and commuting. So can St. Charles County accommodate some 74,000 new residents countywide by 2030? Can we meet our housing needs for an aging population and for workers at all pay scales? Can we create higher paying jobs to match the skills of our workforce and reduce the need to commute outside the county? And can we encourage job growth with identified targeted business sectors? That provides an overview of the plan overall. Again, there's different chapters. Now, the jurisdiction of this body, I think, is land use. So I wanted to talk more specifically about land use. You have in the plan a 2018 current land use map. And so we've mapped countywide all of the uses. Now, I would say it's an imperfect map in that we base this upon the county assessor's data. And so if you look on a very detailed level, parcel by parcel, everything may not be perfect, but the point is that overall as patterns, it does provide land use patterns, and it gives us a basis for doing projections, land use projections. I mentioned the vision and goals. There is specifically for land use, there is a vision and goals, and then there's strategies underneath the goals. And I would say that the Master Plan Steering Committee is not recommending any changes to the vision or to the goals that was in the 2025 plan to the 2030 plan. They're recommending to retain the vision and the goals for land use. You'll see in the plan the detailed strategies on how to achieve those vision and goals. Getting right to the future land use section, I would say that I would like to admit as much as anyone that I could do a better job, I think, of not only consulting the future land use map, but also tying that with the concepts, for instance, the key land use concepts that are within the master plan, maybe to provide some more context for recommendations. So that's something I'd like to work on in the next few months. But the key concepts are, for instance, urban development focused within an urban service area. Sorry, I'm having a... Thank you. Thank you. So the key future land use concepts, let's see if this is working. Urban development focused within an urban service area. Balanced mix of housing and jobs. Neighborhoods with housing choices. Variety of vital activity centers. Now, those are key land use concepts that have further description on what that really means. But these are kind of like overarching concepts that are above these detailed land use recommendations that you'll see in this future land use map. You'll also see, this is an example of that first concept, the urban services boundary. And this line that you see is the dash line. That's a key concept in the plan. What that means is, pretty much this is expecting where the extent of where sewer we're thinking could be in 2030, based on our contacts with the utility companies and our mapping of the service areas and et cetera. We're expecting that by 2030, that line will pretty much show the limits for future sewer services. That is important for our consideration because, as you may know, sewer service pretty much dictates low density development versus any other development. Usually, subdivisions of anything of less than 3 acres pretty much requires public sewer. Obviously, commercial and industrial and other such uses mostly requires sanitary sewer. And that's why you see so much commercial industrial development, for instance, happen in the cities where they have more opportunities for sanitary sewer. Now, I would say there are sanitary service areas that are not within cities. There are some areas of the county that have their own private sanitary sewer districts. But that's a key concept that's here in the master plan that people should hopefully recognize. I won't go through all the concepts, but I would say that for each one of the future land use categories, there is a detailed section on desired characteristics and also design ideals. And personally, I find this is one of the more challenging areas of the master plan because some of this is, frankly, it's educational and it may provide guidance, but we maybe not necessarily have strict rules that, for instance, neighborhoods must tie in a certain way. There doesn't necessarily have to be X number of entrances or exits to neighborhoods, things like that. So anyway, this portion of the master plan provides these ideals for neighborhood design that we can share with the development community and provide as guidance, but it might not necessarily dictate. That's what I'm trying to say. Future land use map. We have a 2025 future land use map that you're all very familiar with. It comes in paper form and online. We have a draft 2030 land use map, and let me provide on the easels side by side so you can see the differences.
Yeah, switch those.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see a lot of difference there, yeah. I didn't know it was 6 by old.
There are 6 differences in this picture.
Yeah, can you find that?
I do know where the Bluffs is at, though.
The draft 2030 future land use map, I'll say that when I talked about not starting over again with the master plan, that was also our thought with this future land use map as well. The changes that are being recommended, first and foremost, it incorporates the master plans of Wentzville, Lake St. Louis, O'Fallon, ones that those communities have adopted since 2013. We enlisted or requested of all the different municipalities any information on future land use that they would like to incorporate. And so those were the main communities that responded. And so we've incorporated those within this master plan. There are some other changes, some relatively minor changes to the urban service area to recognize communities such as Wentzville, and you recognize in the very northwest corner of the county, we are recommending some, or the Master Plan Steering Committee is recommending some changes because that's Wentzville's service area in terms of sewer. We flipped the colors between agricultural district and parks and open space just because it's a lot more easier to read, we think. Also, this is a subtle change, but I very much appreciate this. We've made the agricultural tourism district to be an overlay area, and with the underlying agricultural-based land use. The reason that I think that's helpful is because so many times when we come to this body, what does the master plan say? Well, if it's an agricultural tourism area, that zoning district requires a minimum of 40 acres, and there's all sorts of little lots in that agricultural tourism designated area that aren't 40 acres. So anyway, that's something that's been recommended. There are some other minor changes as well, but I would say probably the one that has generated the most discussion lately has to do with the extent of the future the rural residential designation. That's the lightest yellow that you see. In the 2025 plan, let's see if I can hopefully toggle back and forth. You'll see that in the 2025 plan, there's this crescent of that lighter yellow rural residential in the southwestern part of the county, south of Wentzville and south of Highway N. So that's a recommended land use of rural residential, which could equate to 3-acre residential development, with the darker green representing, in theory, 5-acre development. Now, I say in theory because in reality, there's already a lot of 3-acre subdivisions in that green area. And those aren't really captured in the future land use map. But in this version, recommended by the Master Plan Steering Committee, it is an attempt to capture the existing 3-acre subdivisions in that area because one thing, we do get a lot of applications, it seems like, coming before this body and the county council, and they ask, there's already 3-acre lots all around me, why do I need to do a 5-acre lot minimum subdivision? And so this is something that was attempted to address that. Now, in drawing the southern boundary line of this rural residential area, there were a couple of considerations. One was that trying to take in existing 3-acre lot subdivisions. Second was to do so with some identifiable boundaries, which may seem somewhat arbitrary, but on the other hand, like a certain highway is an easily identifiable a boundary. And third, just a general sense of the soil and the slopes that are more generally developable, because the farther south you go, it gets a lot more rough. Now, having said that.
Robert, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I highlighted this, and we were talking about the rural residential. It says landowners may develop large lot, single-family rural residential or cluster development on smaller lots to conserve open space, views, and other natural features. So my question is, if I had, say, 25 acres and I wanted to build 5 homes, instead of making the homes all be spread out, that I plat 5, say, 1-acre lots that are right together, and so then I don't disturb the other 20 acres, and I have less pavement for streets and those types of things.
Right.
Is that what you mean by this? And if so, what changes would we have to make in the UDO?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because in the residential, single-family residential zoning district, by right, developers can do cluster development for homes. And so if you could build 20 homes on a piece of ground, you could still build 20 homes, but they could be on smaller lots, and the rest of it would be set aside as permanent open space. That's a concept, more than a concept. Our zoning regulations actually allow that by right currently. Now, but that's just in the single-family residential zoning districts. Now, what comes into play is, in order to have lots that are much smaller, you really need sanitary sewer service of some sort of collective sanitary sewer service, whether it's actually tying into a system or whether it's just a smaller system that's provided just for that subdivision or a couple subdivisions. Let's see, what was I gonna? In terms of the southern boundary of this potential, the lightest yellow, the rural residential, I just mentioned what some of the considerations that went into the thinking, but I would also say, there could be other ideas as well, or other factors. One idea might be to tie it to a more detailed or rigorous look at soils. This is a generalized soil map. We have the advantage of the St. Charles County Soil and Water Conservation District, and also with our very detailed soil mapping countywide. And so that's another way to look at where the best location could or should be for that southern line. I guess the bottom line is, I believe there's a market for these 3-acre rural subdivisions in the county, and those logically aren't going to happen in the cities. And so that's probably St. Charles County unincorporated's, it's probably up to us in order to offer that as an opportunity for a development type in the unincorporated county. In your staff report, I won't go over that now, but you'll see that there's very detailed land use projections that our county staff prepared, showing what's the current number of acres, what's the projected acres by the types of all these different land uses. In other words, what we think our need is going to be, and then finally, how many acres are mapped here. And I would say for residential, we feel like there's far more acres mapped than we actually need. Now, that's a little misleading, maybe, because, for one thing, those areas that are showed in solid color, they're not necessarily going to be future solid or singular land uses. What I mean by that is, if you have a low-density area that's yellow, it's probably going to include schools, neighborhood commercial, institutions, and other land uses that are mixed in. That's all part of the key land use concepts. In fact, not having those integrated land uses, I think it would mean probably, it would be beneficial, I should say, to have those sorts of complementary uses in closer proximity to each other. And then finally, you also want to provide some opportunity for choices and to factor in the fact that not all properties will be available for development. Some will and some won't. So there doesn't necessarily need to be a one-to-one numerical correlation between the number of acres mapped and the projected need. But we did want to provide that to you so you could at least say, absolutely, there's more than the minimum we feel like provided. There's not going to be a scarcity of land zone, those districts that we're talking about. So the consideration that you have before you County staff is requesting that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and comment on sections of the draft 2030 master plan concerning land use and future land use under the county's jurisdiction, in other words, in the unincorporated portions of the county. And second, to vote to recommend approval with changes or disapproval of the land use and future land use components under the county's jurisdiction as contained in this draft plan. And county staff, as well as the master plan steering committee, are recommending that you recommend approval.
Any questions, Mr. Meyer? Any questions? Mr. Griffin, you have any questions?
Yeah, well, in review of this, and I talked to Nancy, I know did a great job on this. I've been to meetings, I listened to all the concept plans. I was on the original when Joe Ortworth was community director, and then Mr. Elman was elected. But you did have people from planning and zoning, 2 people were involved in a lot of the planning. None of us were involved, which is sad. According to the booklet here, the only thing we're charged with, not with transportation, schools, jobs, everything there, the only thing our responsibility is land use. And that's what we do, land use. And it's sad that maybe in the future you would include somebody. I know Mr. Klinghammer's on the county council, with some representatives from here. The biggest changes, and I've heard from people that live down here, because we've gone through 3 master plans, is people in agricultural. So.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
We've gone through several master plans.
Yeah.
And the most people that I hear live down in where I live in, the agricultural district, and changes evolve. And rather than sit here and talk for an hour, but I know some of the concept plans when this was developed, when everything was agricultural down there, and Mr. Wayne Anthony wanted to stop all septic tanks in St. Charles County. And agricultural definition was going to go to 25 acres. And it listed here it was 5. It was going to go to 25. And Joe Cronin, I think, had worked on that. And it did not come to fruition. Mr. Brazel got involved, and it was reduced to 5. Because everything south of Highway 40, nobody could afford 25 acres and then afford a house, which makes sense. A couple of the other, one of the components that you mentioned were sewers, and that will have an impact on how far you can grow with a plan. And where you had your line drawn, I would sort of agree, anything south of there, it wouldn't make sense. There's a lot of big, large landowners which aren't going to sell. They don't need the money. And the other way to put a sewer is back through Bush's Wildlife from 94. Talk to engineers that have an office there at D&D, and physical impossibility and cost prohibitive. But going back to our responsibility, it's just land use and all the other concepts. And I think you guys did a magnificent job. I saw Michael give a presentation at St. Peter's Library. Sadly, we had a very low turnout for affecting almost 500,000 people, and you had 9 people turn out for a meeting, which was really, in my mind, pathetic that people that live out here, in my view, they just didn't know about it. And I know when I talked to you at the meeting, you said, well, we should do this. People can look at it online. I think people look at their cell phone, they find out what their kids are doing, this, that, and the other thing. The last thing on their agenda out of an 8 or 10 hour day is to go to the county council. I did suggest this as a positive thing, and I sent you an email to everybody else, and contacting the Post, at least put something in print. Mm-hmm. And it's negotiable with them. I talked to them, I said, how much does it cost? But St. Peter's saying, all the municipalities put something in print in the newspaper. I think for this meeting, it's in hindsight now, it would have behooved this to be made for public. And I think it would support the amount of turnout that we had. It was really poor. I can get more people in my house than you had at your meeting, and you spent a lot of money for all the, I know Michael did a great presentation. You had, Mark was there, and for all the money and the expense, we didn't get the input from residents. First meeting I was here, and Nancy, I think, was at that meeting. There were 250 people from various different zones, and we broke up in different groups. We all had big maps. We all came up in groups of 10, coming up with what we thought representing all the different zones. And these are the people who live in those zones. And then they were put up on a wall. Everybody voted on those. We came down to 2, but it was a nice process, but it had most of the residents, involved. So I would just like to put that on the record. Maybe in the future we could improve, the process, at least as far as planning and zoning. And that's all the other land uses. We don't deal with transportation, but we deal, as you point out in here, just land use. And that's what we deal with. So I think in the future, I think somebody on at least 1 or 2 representatives from planning and zoning would contribute something more than what we have in the last meeting. And I know you said that, I assume this is going to be voted on at the county council meeting on the 7th?
Yeah, well, it will be presented in the form of an ordinance to the county council on January 7th.
So to do any changes, I know you said submit anything, I mean, it's not going to happen, so. But I just wanted it for everybody here, and Michael and yourself and the staff, I think. You learn from mistakes, and I think we can improve on this in the future, at least as far as planning and zoning. And again, I commend all the work you've done, a lot of work, and consulting a lot of the statistics and a lot of issues to deal with as St. Charles County grows. And we are growing, for sure.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You need a motion just on the land use portion of it from the planning and zoning, right?
We have to
approve?
We have to approve the whole plan.
Our request is that you make recommendations concerning the land use components of the
So
2030
moved.
master
Just
plan.
the,
Land
well, do we, Council, do we hold a public hearing?
Yeah.
Do we need to hold a public hearing?
No,
I
no,
don't-
you're,
This is just,
That's right.
I hate to tell you this, this is, in a sense, a courtesy being extended to
Yep.
you to educate you on
okay.
what they're thinking about on the master plan and especially the land use component.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Now,
there's no public hearing, so.
okay.
this-
Now, and we're just voting on the land use portion.
Land use and future land use components of
Okay.
the,
Because since Lindenwood University specifically mentioned under the economy section, that doesn't disqualify me, does it?
No.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Fromm. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, is Mr. Kuhn. All those in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got one last thing to do that's not on the agenda.
Can I bring up one thing? About 2
No,
meetings.
it's too late.
Please.
Quiet. No, quiet, Gary. I have the floor. Shh. Quiet. Shh.
This was a motion made 2 meetings ago.
What, no, hold on, Gary, I've got to do something here.
Okay.
You may or may not know that this is our county councilor, Mr. Hazelwood's last meeting. He is retiring in how many hours?
It's tough enough for me to keep track of the number of days, much less hours, but
So on the record,
December
Keith,
31st.
we want to thank you for all your guidance and support for this commission and for St. Charles County.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And you all you've been a wonderful part of my experience, number one. Number two, I want to mention that my successor, John Watson, whom I think will hopefully come and you'll get a chance to meet him, but wonderful credentials and a very personable individual, and I think you'll have a nice experience with him. thirdly, during my tenure, we did hire a person who I sort of, in a friendly manner, refer to as the 20-year land use attorney for the county, and that's Ardita Rourke. And hopefully you'll get her educated where you are comfortable working with her and so forth. So I think you're in great hands with John Watson and Ardita Rourke. So thank you for my time with you.
You're welcome. Okay, Mr. Griffin?
Well, and I'm not following Robert's rule of law, which I do have, Robert's rule of law. I showed this to our attorney on staff. I do have Robert's rule of law for dummies, so. So I'm not going to follow that, but I'm not going to follow that.
But you thought you just mentioned it.
I made a motion a couple months ago regarding the definition in agricultural for notification.
Right.
And it was supposed to go to the county council to wordsmith it. After that meeting, I talked to Roger, and I know one of your concerns was the expense, where an agricultural portion would be tangent to a higher density one. It costs the county, 200 or 300 people. When I talked to Roger after the meeting to wordsmith that very simply, to extend the boundaries in agricultural, where the agricultural piece of land is tangent to other agricultural things. That would eliminate your concern about sending out, 1,000 letters to somebody where you were in a high-density area. But when I made the motion, I think everybody did the math on that. You can put a sign out there, and in agricultural, people, either way, they're never going to get a notification of it unless they happen to drive by and slam the brakes on and read a little sign. So where is that? Did that go to the county council, or is it?
I can answer this.
Okay.
So just to bring you up to speed, the process by which it works when the Planning and Zoning Commission offers an amendment to the UDO, which is what this was going forward, is that you provide the ordinance language specific to put into the ordinance. County Councilor's office will draft that ordinance and take it to the county council. The ordinance wasn't specific enough. However, we're trying to work with the county councilor's office on drafting that.
Okay.
So that we will bring back a draft ordinance to this body in January.
Okay.
The issues, just so that you're aware, when Planning and Zoning Commission offers an amendment to the UDO, we have to look at the legality of it, we have to look at the process involved, and we have to look at the cost. So those are three things that we are tasked with, making sure that the consequences of this UDO amendment, which always are far-reaching and impact many other things that people don't think about, we have to try to bring that into account. So it's not as simple as just, this is what we want to do, we need to go forward with it. So we are providing that, we're going to have that draft ordinance, we'll come back, we will discuss it with you in terms of those issues. And then we can proceed from there, whether it goes to council or what you want to do.
Yeah, when we left it, the discussion, because Robert's concern, which made sense, if you had an agricultural and adjacent to a very high-density thing,
Okay.
your number 3 issue, cost, it would be very costly.
That answer your question?
Does it
Yeah.
answer your question?
Okay. Anything else? Any other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, all those in favor, sign aye. Aye. Aye.